We will allow a couple of questions at the end. Let's hear Mr. Soundararajan, a well-known man in Bangalore. He is a graduate from electrical engineering from Tyagarajar College, Madurai. Holds MBA from PSD College of Technology, Coimbatore. He joined HAL as a management trainee in 1975 and has got exposure and experience in manufacture, repair, overhaul of aircraft, helicopters, piston engines and accessories. He has covered project management, quality assurance, integrated materials management, production management, corporate planning and marketing. He has served as HAL's resident manager in the HAL liaison office at India High Commission UK during 1998-2001. He has undertaken several path-breaking initiatives in HAL, like aligning the quality systems to international standard AS 9100. He has implemented ERP systems, indigenization of key systems, establishing a long-term business agreement and supply chain management. During his tenure, he has established major overall line for Mirage 2000 and its systems outside France for the first time. He was responsible for establishing a world-class state-of-art center of excellence for manufacturing aerospace composites. Mr. Soundararajan is a proud recipient of National Award for Indigenization by Aeronautical Society of India. Prior to he became Director Corporate Planning and Marketing, he was the General Manager Projects at the corporate headquarters of HAL in Bangalore, and he was responsible for all the business development activities of HAL. In addition to his role of Director Corporate Planning and Marketing, he has recently been given additional responsibility as the Managing Director of Helicopter Complex. So added responsibility. So this Dr. Soundararajan, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. 70 years back, the stage was set for aerospace technology success through global cooperation. An American, Mumbai-based Indian private entrepreneur, and the state government of Mysore. Three entities joined together, and the result is today Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, which is a product of global collaboration. 70 years later, a Mumbai-based industrialist, Anand Mahindra, an American, Dinesh Keshkar, Boeing, and the state government or the central government, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited today, kickstarts a seminar on aerospace technologies, success through global collaboration. Maybe history is repeating after 70 years. Now, I am standing in for Mr. Ashok Nayak, Chairman HAL, who has got some personal emergencies and couldn't make it. When we talk about aero and space technologies, talking about this to this August gathering is like carrying coal to Newcastle. But I suppose I have to do these days because there is hardly any coal in Newcastle, so better to talk about technologies. Just 3 slides about technologies, aerospace technologies. The Defense Minister said this in the morning. The RRM said this in the morning. Mr. Mahindra said this, and the same thing is presented here. We talk about the range of technologies involved, the multi-disciplines that the technologies cover, and the time cycle that is required for developing aerospace technology. I will just take only with respect to aircraft, not with respect to the space. If you look at the range of technologies, we are talking about technologies in airframe, in engines, in systems and accessories, in the avionics, for either a manned vehicle or an unmanned vehicle, which is either having fixed wing or has got rotary wing, and which is used either for military application or for civil application. Now you can see the permutation combinations and the kind of technologies that one have to develop, the range of technologies. For those students who are very keen on this, aircraft technologies literally involve every single discipline of engineering. A few of them are highlighted here. Environmental control, air conditioning system, avionics and electrical, aerodynamics, stress, fatigue, dynamics, materials, structures, hydraulics, landing gear, controls, fuel, power plant, you name, everything else is in this. So this is the multidisciplinary nature of the technologies. This is the one which is globally published document. You want to develop technologies, don't expect the technology to come out tomorrow. There is a definite time cycle for research and technologies, research and development. There's a subtle difference between the two. You need to develop the technologies ab initio from the institution level. You had the Raksha Mantri saying in the morning about the universities, students and academic institutions' participation. We are talking about fundamental research, technology acquisition, and technology validation. And we are talking about a 15 years time cycle. And then pull the technology into the industry for development purpose, which takes about another 6 years. You will see prototype coming in 6 years. That's converting the technology into a developmental product. And then technology has to be valid for 25 more years. So we are now talking about a 50-year time cycle for technology to develop and then mature and then serve the customer. This is the uniqueness of aerospace technology. Now, having spoken about technology, how do we bring that together through global collaboration? Now, if you, as an industry, I speak from an industry perspective, if you have to talk about collaboration and success, then that particular objective has to be embedded in your vision and mission of the organization itself. If you are looking at global collaboration and success, and you are looking at aerospace technology, then that has to find ways and means into your vision document and mission document. Now, there is something there from our organization. There are two red indicated that is the driving point for global collaboration. The example I said was set 70 years back. Now, across the sweep, if you look at, we have a very, very conscious decision of achieving success by judiciously mixing the global collaboration vis-a-vis the self-reliance and innovative indigenous technologies. Now, the helicopters, the aircraft, the products that are listed here across these 70 years of existence clearly bring out that mission statement, and the products are clearly bringing out the success that India has achieved through a judicious mix of license program and the indigenous development program. The result is what started as a small American repair base. I don't know how many of you know that. The company started as a repair base for American World War aircraft. And that started as a repair base, today is a leading aeronautical complex in South Asia. Started from the first generation fighters, and we are moving into the fifth generation fighters 70 years later. Just to give a classic example of this is textbook stuff, but look at the last bottom line there in terms of the technology gaps that has been bridged across the decades. It started with the Vampire. Even today, some of you come to HAL, there's a gate called Vampire Gate. I don't know how many of you will be familiar with that. That gate is even today called as a Vampire Gate. And then there's a place called Bristol Quarters. That's a collaboration. So, Hawker Siddeley, those days, in the 60s, was the Bristol Quarters. So you will see that evidence is coming up there, from Vampire into the MiGs, into the Jaguars, the Mirage 2000 and the LCA, followed by Sukhoi 30 and entering into the FGFA. That's a gradual evolution that has happened over the years. The same thing is presented in a pictorial form. The horizon is pretty wide. Every single range, what we talked about in the very first slide, is covered in this. Now, we will take step one, part one. How did we do global cooperation through license production? You will see in this slide more than 1,800, 1798 to be precise, and 640 helicopters have been made through global cooperation in HAL. The technology ranges from Prentice and Vampire to the Hawk, from the Alouettes and the Llamas. How do we do this collaboration? Do we take the technology straight away and start absorbing it immediately? It doesn't happen that way. From an industrial perspective, from a practical perspective, the collaboration and cooperation takes place in stages. A typical example is given here. One need not have to attach importance to what is the kind of aircraft here. Is this the model HAL is going to follow? It's just an example here. We follow in phase 1. You get almost the finished goods there. You can look at the yellow portion there. That's the kind of value addition that the Indian industry starts with, and then moves on to a bigger scale, and then takes it over for the entire manufacturing. So you absorb the technologies in phases. How many types of phases? Depends on the kind of technology, the kind of complexity of the product, the kind of industrial infrastructure that you have. Now, in this process, what are the learnings? What are the issues in global cooperation? There are quite a lot of issues that will happen. This is practical, hands-on, barefoot management style issues. When you take technology collaboration, remember the statement what Aram made in the morning. You are not going to get 5th generation technology to this country immediately. You are going to get a technology which has been used, exploited. You remember that the 50-year cycle? After the 25th year, the technology comes here. That means the basic technology has been developed, evolved in a prototype, matured in a product, and then it comes to you. And when it comes here, the place from where it is originated, that OEM is no more handling the technology. The OEM's supply chain or the tiered suppliers are handling the technology. Now, when you transfer that technology, there is a big gap between the OEM's technology level today and the technology which is transferred today, and people have to put in a lot of resources to regenerate the technologies and give you those documentation. In other words, there is a very clear telescopic transformation of information or the technology. And when there is a telescopic transformation, you have got issues related to losses. Quite simple. And that you will find in the form of discrepancies in documentation, discrepancies in the process sheets, reliability systems, obsolescence. These are issues which you will see during technology collaboration. And then we have to guard against certain pitfalls. You don't get the full technology. Many of the times it could be limited. It could be related to the exploitation in terms of price. It could be the non-availability of long-term agreements. It could be on a quite need-based. And then there could be problems with respect to IP, with respect to the government. So the result is, as an indigenous industry, you have to make sure that you guard against these pitfalls when you go through a collaboration in a participative mode like this. Now let's come to phase 2, the indigenous development. Do we need global cooperation in indigenous development? If somebody is expecting 100% indigenous development, they're absolutely wrong. It is impossible to have 100% indigenous development. There's bound to be global cooperation in this field of aerospace. Now, if you look at this particular chart, you will see again an equal number almost, 1089 and 117 of different range of products that are made. Where are the collaborations coming in from? Specific design areas where you have a deficiency, you go for global cooperation to acquire the particular technology in the form of a design consultancy. Or go in for adaptation of an existing proven system. There is no point in reinventing the wheel. If there is a system available, pick it up, adapt it to your particular platform, and that is where the global cooperation comes in the indigenous development program. Now, like we see in the license production, do we have issues in these areas? Yes. I just reproduced certain statements made. It's courtesy Pricewaterhouse. Again, if you are looking at globalization, nobody is going to come and give you technology if they don't have access to the market in which you are working. So the first thing is there is a compromise. Are you going to take the technology and compromise your market? Is it one of your objectives? And the same thing is strategic requirements are subjected to government regulations. A&D field is such that government regulations is inevitable in every single country. So this is the challenge that the industry has to face, that in case you want to develop the technologies indigenously. Added to that, just an example here, the names do not signify anything specific here. This is again a published document. Supply chain has completely changed. Look at the 80s and the today's suppliers. Classic example I took for carbon fiber, because that's the technology that we are adapting today for every single from a host of suppliers. Today we land up in just 4 suppliers. That's the kind of alignment that has happened over the years. So for any development that you do indigenously, your first challenge comes as supply chain. What are the mitigation strategies that one have to look at? I've brought out some key issues, not necessarily all comprehensive. Critical technologies. A classic case is the directional solidified blades for the engines, the ring laser based inertial navigation system, the smart materials, and the IR based systems. These are some examples that today, as an industry, we are developing in collaboration with the defense research laboratories and the academic institutions. Development of systems. Integrated architecture display systems, you call it glass cockpit, automatic flight control systems, flight control actuators, and open architecture mission computers. These are some examples of systems that are being developed to mitigate the risk in indigenous development. Classic case is a carbon fiber. Today we have the technology developed by NIL, and the technology is going to be pulled through into the development phase by HAL through the form of prepreg manufacturing. The next is joint ventures. In the morning there was a reference to formation of joint ventures. That's the next approach for global cooperation. Here is a list of joint ventures that the industry has adopted with global leaders and the Indian industries, private industries. You will see two of them without the logo. They have just been formed. One is for the machining and other is for the multi-role transport aircraft. Now, formation of joint ventures is another risk mitigation strategy. Global collaboration, should it be only one way for India? It is not. We need to look at a win-win situation for both. Here is an example of the current level of collaboration that we have on a win-win situation with different leading players of the world. Now, what are the factors that shape the aerospace globalization? The factors which are on the positive side are the competitive labor cost and the productivity. Currency risk hedge is one of them, which the Europeans quite often now refer that as one of the reasons for coming in here. Access to broader pool of suppliers and resources. This has to be validated because, as Mr. Mahendra said, not many private players are in the game at the moment. Proven players are in the moment. And the biggest asset is the market access, which they are looking at. On the negative side, you have the security and IP restrictions, IP protections. Of course, there is always a political backlash. And then the other reason which I said is that execution risk, which I highlighted in the earlier slide. So if you have to look for global cooperation, then the partnership has to be on equal footing. It should not be averse to risk-sharing ventures. It should max customer satisfaction, whether it's the Indian customer or the global customer, and should not attract the end-user agreement delays and should not be subjected to any restrictions on that. So there is another model to overcome this. It's the co-development model, which is the best suited model in today's world. I will give you two examples of what we have gone in for. This is known to everybody. This is the multi-role transport aircraft, which we are now co-developing with Russian partners, and the fifth generation fighter aircraft, which addresses quite a bit of very, very critical technologies which are otherwise were not available. So just to sum up, success in global cooperation in aerospace technology is a mindset. That's what somebody was telling in the morning. And so too is global cooperation. Thank you.
I think we can take a couple of questions for both Dr. Keskar and Soundarajan in case anybody wants clarification or raise a point. Probably you can say so before we wind up the session. Yeah, please. He's not here, unfortunately. Yeah. Pass. A good question for him.
I've been facing this question for the last 2 years in all the seminars on this. hopefully the seminar doesn't get into one of public sector versus private sector and that kind of a discussion. But primarily, if you look at, this happened in the last month, it was in Hyderabad where the similar seminar was there. HAL, or for that matter, public sectors, do not hate private sectors. Number one, point number one. And we don't feel threatened by public sector, private sector. There are a lot of misconceptions. We are not threatened by private sector. In fact, HAL has got a very, very unique role that it is our job to develop the tiered supply chain in this country, that if we have to handle so much of work in this aerospace sector. There was a period where we were very vertically integrated, right from rivets to aircraft was being made under one roof. We do not think that this will be the route for success anymore. It's our job to develop a very structured tier suppliers. But what we look at in that point of view is how many of them are going to sustain this game. This game is a very, very painful game. It takes time for you to score a goal. It takes quite a lot of injuries before you really go and pack the goal in. How many of us are ready to do that is a question. And in that process, quality and reliability cannot be compromised. You can't compromise quick returns for quality. So that is the issue. Those are those companies who are ready to balance these two. They will definitely come up, and it's our responsibility to hold the hands of them and bring them up.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? I didn't know he's a footballer. Okay. Yeah, please. Somebody there.
Yeah.
When can you expect this sort of configuration?
Well, it's hard to predict when that will happen, but I can tell you, as a young researcher at the Boeing company in 1978, okay, when I first joined Boeing in 1980, I used to visit Boeing in 78, the blended wing body was talked about. So there is a lot of research is being done, a lot of activities are being done. What it takes to bring it to the market, I would say it's more painful than the goal that Mr. Somasundaram was talking about, okay? The fly-by-wire technology, for example, was known to us in the early 80s. It wasn't until 1995 that it came on the 777. So blended wing body is a radical different concept. As you know, we brought the 787. We're going to bring this here to the world, which is a completely different concept. So while I tell you the research continues and there are a lot of excited people about blended wing body, and I do see there is a future to it, I cannot predict sitting here when will it come. I can't even say it's going to come in the next 10 years. But the research will continue, and when the price to cost loop will close, what that means simply is when there is a definition of how much it will cost to produce all the components of the blended wing body, and are there people out there, meaning airlines, who are willing to pay for that, that's when I think that airplane will see the life. I mean, there are several concepts right now that are out there. There is a concept I have seen where basically it's everything, even next version of the blended wing body, at least on the BWB that I showed up, you can see the wings. There are other concepts where you hardly see the wings in the airplane. It's all delta wing type of structure. So there are several concepts. I think they will come one at a time when the world is ready for them. But I think the research will continue, and that's what it is. There are many ideas that people continue to work on and don't come to the life. But I think this one will happen, just don't know when, okay? Thank you for the question.
But what sort of TRL level you would say at the moment Boeing is in terms of research with, probably with X-48, if I want to be more precise?
Yeah, so we do three kinds of researches. The one I showed you very clearly, which is the initial research that we're doing around the world, okay? Yeah. The second research we do, which is specific to the products, like the 787 or like the improvement of the 777 or 737. And as you can imagine, we spend a lot of time on the first and the second. On the second, we spend inordinate amount of time because if something needs to be solved, we'll solve it now. When it comes to the futuristic type designs and airplanes, we have what I consider a core group of people. I can't tell you how many, but there is a core group of people, and they'll continue to work, and the ideas will continue to evolve. And all I can tell you is some concepts. There was another idea which was unducted fan. Some of you may remember that, okay? We're going to come up out with an airplane which didn't have any ducting around the fan. It was a great fuel efficiency. GE35 was the engine that was going to make it. It never came to the world. And the reason it didn't come to the world because the technology and the price and the cost loop didn't close. And so while we continue to do the research, when we see there is a better hope, then it gets tossed to the next set of people who will do what's called a little bit additional detailed design. And so, yes, we are investing time in it. We're not going to let it just go, but it will only come to life, and don't know how many Aero Indias you have to wait for. Okay.
Thank you.
Very good afternoon, sir. My name is Prajval from NCAD NEL. I have a question to the Boeing. So this is regarding 787 delay, sir.
Yeah.
So one thing what we read from the report was that in terms of outsourcing, it went very far. So that is one thing. Can you throw some light on it? And the second thing is like, what is the three things which you learned from this experience which you would like to share by this delay of 787? Thank you very much.
Fair question. First of all, Super Bowl just got done. Those who are Americans, you will know what that means. There was the finals like your World Cup cricket, okay? And what I mean, what I was about to say, that it's very easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. What that means is when the game is over, you can always, hundreds of people can come and say, oh, Boeing should have done that, Boeing should have done this. However, having said that, I will accept your premise that there was too much outsourcing. But I will also say you were asking me what were the three additional lessons that you have learned. The bottom line was clearly the outsourcing. This is the first time where we even outsourced the wing outside the Boeing company, which we have always done it ourselves. The second thing that happened was this was a radical leap in technology. When you go from 767 to the 777, the body, the aluminum structure, the engines, that was just what I call an incremental improvement. Where this airplane, we're talking about a 15 to 20% efficiency because of structure, because of aerodynamics, because of systems, and because of engines. So we are adding new technologies to the tune that the fuel efficiency of this airplane will be 15 to 20% better than today's aircraft. That is the reason why this airplane became so successful, and we sold so many airplanes, but the technology leap was so high that instead of expanding the time horizon in which we typically do a design program, Boeing tried to condense it because we thought we have new technologies, we have computers, we have smarter people, we have smarter technologies, and all that can do things quicker. So the idea was, can we cut down the cycle time? And I kind of see it now that we couldn't. And the third thing to answer is there are many flight test programs Boeing has done, and except for the 787, I can tell you flawlessly, everything worked out as expected. On the 787, as you know, we had a major side-to-body joint issue that took us time. Unfortunately, just before Christmas last year, we had a fire on a panel, which now we have solved that problem. And we feel now that we have reached a stage that with much of the flight test program over and with many risks retired on that very brand new high technology program, the world will see the 787 in operation. And I will submit one last thing, this is my personal opinion, that once that airplane comes to service, and Air India is one of the lead customers for it, around the world, I think a year from now, people are going to forget about the delays. They're going to enjoy the great flying experience that airplane is going to give you. But thank you for the great question.
Yeah.
That was a very nice session of aircraft technology, keynote session number 1.